So when we start playing and we're beginners, we don't have a lot of experience with improvising for other people. And also, you know, we don't really know what's a great line, why is a line great, what's a mediocre line, and even also when it comes to time and rhythm, why is something like swinging really hard or maybe not swinging at all? Why does sound something not so good, and why is something great and all the musicians like freak out because it's so cool? In the beginning, it's hard to understand that. Maybe we can feel if something draws us nearer for the energy of it, but from like a, you know, mental perspective of judging it, it's really hard, and we sort of need to be able to do that for ourselves to get better, right? Or to know what to aim for. And when we watch a lot of YouTube videos and look which YouTube videos have a lot of clicks, very often it's fast lines, right? Playing giant steps at 400 beats per minute, playing all the time, very fast lines. And it's always about lines and improvisation. Of course, there are videos about comping and stuff as well, but it seems those flashy lines, yeah, they just like, you know, it's clear somebody can play if somebody can move their fingers really fast. For somebody who doesn't know anything about playing the guitar, that's astonishing how a person can do that. But if that's the right guide for us to start learning to play jazz guitar, I really wonder. And this video is really for people who want to play jazz guitar because they want to make music and also want to play with other people. It's not so much for people who are happy at home, playing on their own and just like, you know, learning fast lines and playing fast lines just for the fun of it. I'm really all about making music and how you can learn to make music, and then a lot of different things come into the equation, like for example, to listen to the other musicians, to react to the other musicians, playing a nice accompaniment, right? And all the stuff that goes into making music is so much more than playing fast lines. And all those things that, you know, sort of influence on the internet, I think they also come into the practice room. And jazz guitar, no doubt, to learn jazz guitar with all those chords and scales has always been overwhelming. Trust me, when I started, there was no internet, but it was still overwhelming. So many tunes and so many chords and endless concepts and books and VHS cassettes, so it was always overwhelming. But maybe now it seems to be even more overwhelming, maybe because also we get the impression when we see that somebody does something with ease. I think due to our mirror neurons, yes, you know, those neurons in our brain that tell us we can do the same thing the other person is doing, sort of. That can be tricky because we see this person in the moment performing an excellent performance, right? But we don't see that maybe this person practiced for like 5 hours or more since the age of 6. And now she put on a nice dress or whatever it is, a nice background, and shot a video. But it goes so much into it that it can be like an illusion that we can maybe think that we can reach this goal very fast. And then when we sit down to practice, we are in a rush because we want and think we can do that too, and we think we can learn to play like this too. And I think what often happens is that we then cram everything in one session, like it's our last day, right? We have only this day to practice sort of in our mind. We want instant gratification, right? We want to feel better about our own playing, and we want to master a tune or a lick today, because on the other day we have so much stuff that we still need to practice. And like this, sort of, we are setting ourselves up for failure, because we can only get better if we reduce stuff and get into the details, into the small practice, and practice slow, sort of. So when we practice stressed out like this, it's like a short-term goal. Today we want to, like, you know, master one thing, and tomorrow we master another thing. But the opposite of that would be, like, of course, like a long-term goal and also like delayed gratification. So sort of we're going to work on something, we're going to have the courage and maybe also the discipline to really work on something for a long period of time. And then maybe for months, we will have mastered it to a degree that we never have mastered anything. And that's the big difference, right? So we can sort of polish one thing so much that it sounds so much better than we ever played before. But for that, we need to stick with this little thing, whatever it is, that we want to, this one thing is so beautiful now that all the rest of our playing will sort of try to be as good as this one thing, if it makes any sense, right? Because it's so much about our hearing expectation. When we sit down with our guitar, if we play every day maybe, we know more or less what's going to come out, how we sound. And then we don't expect something else. But if we take the time to polish one thing that can be tone-wise, can be rhythm, can be a lot of synth to make it better, then this one thing morphs into something else, and then the other things that we play will sort of connect to this one thing that we mastered. Also like this, we're maybe not stressed out in our practice session because finally we have the peace of mind to just really, enjoy the process of playing. The playing itself is enough, right? We don't need that goal of being a great musician or playing this cool solo, but this thing itself already fills our soul. And that only happens when we give ourselves the time to really dive deep. When we practice stressed out, we don't even get to enjoy it. And maybe we're even frustrated because we practice something a couple of times, but then when it needs to show up, when it needs to emerge in our playing, it's not showing up because it needs a as long time. And it's not showing up in our playing because it needs such a long time. And improvisation, right, to show up because it has to become a part of ourselves to show up organically. And I think that's the biggest misunderstanding, that we all think how quick we learn and how quick we can sort of play it. And we can learn quick, right? We can learn like a complicated, whatever it is, thing in a book with like a formula or whatever. We can understand something very quickly on an intellectual level. But to play something is a whole different game, right? Because we hear it, our body has sort of to check what it's going to do, that thing comes out. And there's so many other variables in the equation, like the accompaniment, the day, how is your guitar sounding, did you warm up? And it's just, we are not robots, right? So we can't expect ourselves to work like this if it's about music and if it's in the flow. So I wrote down 10 things that I see with a lot of students, new students, also older students. And right, it makes a difference how you practice. Just like I said, you can become a real good student maybe if you take the time to dig deep, and you can stay sort of an average student if you want to, or just like an average player if you only gloss over stuff. So it all comes down to really your awareness and attention to the moment when you're practicing. And so my first point is, please don't practice in front of a computer screen. I see a lot of people, because I'm also doing the Zoom sessions, right? I see a lot of people who have sort of like built their own cockpit or castle or whatever, motherboard or whatever you want to call it, of screens, and then they have everything they need. They have the guitar, they have the audio interface, they have an expensive mic, they have whatever, right? But if you want to play music, you want to train your ears and not your eyes. And since we are all very visual animals, right? I think like 70% of our brain is working for our vision or sort of something like this. We will really have to work on our hearing to get that up to another level. And we can do that by not looking at anything at all, for example. So just like, be sure you find a corner where you practice. Maybe just for the moment without an amplifier to sitting, even facing a wall. I had periods in my life where I just like didn't even watch out of the window because I find my thoughts are wandering around if I watch the birds and the trees. So I would rather sit really opposite, just like a white, you know, wall, and just like close the eyes and really listen. So that would be my first point. Point number 2. Yeah, many students don't record their own jam tracks because, like I said in the beginning of this lesson, we're also fixated on soloing, right? So we don't even think about comping, but comping is the reality the moment you play with other people because the other person wants to play a solo. And if you fuck up the form and can't play an accompaniment, that's not fun for the other person, right? So you want to make sure you can play a decent accompaniment. Can be super simple, can be like quarter notes, doesn't have to be fancy, just has to work, right? So this is, first of all, please try not to use jam tracks, not only because very often they're not swinging if they're computer generated, right? But also they're like, you know, not helping you in learning to play chords. And playing chords, be it as an accompaniment or in a solo, is actually not such a big of a difference. If you're learning to play one chord after the other by heart, that will help you tremendously for your solo, because in the end, what's happening in your brain when you're playing over changes is to think about one chord and then the next one and the next one. So point number 3 is many people buy a looper, but then they record a jam track and then they leave it on it forever. You know what I mean? They record a jam track for the tune they're practicing, and then the next day they use the same loop and the same loop over and over again. Or worse, they have like a looper that quantifies their recording so it would be perfectly in time. It's not about that. Or they have a looper where they have like 5, you know, places where they can save like 5 jam tracks or 100 jam tracks or what have you. That's not what I mean when I recommend getting a looper. What I mean is that you record yourself a fresh loop every time you sit down and practice, because it acts like a mirror, right? You can hear how your accompaniment sounds, and you can also record your solo on top of it, and then you can also hear how your solo sounds. So it's like a pragmatic way of starting to record yourself and listening back to how you actually sound, because that can also be confusing. We have sort of maybe like an image or something in our head how we sound, but unless we record ourselves, we don't know how we really sound, because that is also very different in the moment where you play and in the moment where you listen back to the recording. And you even might like stuff that you hated while you played it and the other way around. So give that a try. Point number 4 is a little controversial, sort of, because I know people will disagree. And point number 4 is people don't use a pick, right? So what I want to say is I don't like that. I don't like it. I know people play like with the classical kind of a style on the electric guitar. For me, it seems to be something that the internet or YouTube has like brought up. I never have been seeing that before. I don't like how it sounds. My heroes, my guitar heroes like Pat Metheny, Kurt Rosenwinkel, Bill Frisell, John Scofield, they play with a pick. Also, I really doubt that you can play fast, cool lines with your nails like this, but maybe prove me otherwise. Put a link in the description box below. I just wanted to mention it because I think it's limiting to play with fingers. Right, hybrid picking, that's a different story. I'm just like talking about playing lines with a pick, right, on the guitar. And I sometimes have the feeling people shy away from the pick because they're afraid they can't do it. And that's a different story, right? If you're afraid you can do it, I would just say, please give it a shot. If you absolutely need to play without the pick because for whatever reason, then do whatever you like to, but just be sure that you don't avoid it because you think you can't do it. Point number 5 is a little mean again, but yes, I'm on a rant today. I need to get it out. I have a lot of students who don't practice improvisation, and when we start improvising in this room here, they get so frustrated, they lose the form, and it just doesn't work. And yeah, I think it has something to do with this think that we might think that improvisation is sort of something magical. Some people can do it, others can't, or also with the notion that we think to invent something out of thin air and that everything's really like the true improvisation, right? Everybody's always playing stuff that they never played before, which couldn't be farther from the truth. Listen to the great improvisers. Everybody is repeating him or herself, which is fine. So, but I want to say you need to practice improvisation. And if you want to play over jazz standards, you need to practice playing over changes. That means you need to practice playing over one chord to the next chord, to the next chord, to the next chord, adapting to the chord. And you can only practice this by doing it. Of course, you can just like, take 2 or 3 chords that are especially hard out of a tune and practice them. But you have, at the end of the day, you have to give yourself a loop and play over the whole thing. And then the first step is just like to play over all those chords. Maybe with one note, maybe with an etude that you wrote down, but just to know where you are. That's the first step. And all the rest of the game comes much later. Yeah, number 6 is high expectations. Sort of, I think I already covered that in point 5, but still, yeah, right. It's so tricky. We can not understand how much work goes into something unless we did something in our life, in whatever area of your life, that needed so much work until it was really good. It can be sports or any other art form. But yeah, I don't know, it sounds maybe a little silly because like jazz improvisation or jazz is such a niche music. Maybe we think it's easy because of that. I don't know, but it's not easy. It's just not easy. And I just listened to this interview of Pat Metheny that I love, where he talks about that it's not easy and how much work goes into it.
This is a language I've been dealing with for 20 years now. And I mean, in terms of sitting down and if you were to hand me 50 unrelated chords, I could solo through them and all those connections would be made, and I would play 90% right notes, or correct things. But I would also be hearing it because I would be having ideas, and they all kind of go together, which to me just comes from experience and just doing it a lot. For me, while I'm playing, I'm not thinking about tonalities or chords or this or that. But it's an element in what I'm doing. Just like while I'm speaking to you now, in the front of my mind, I'm not thinking about verbs and adjectives and nouns. I'm just talking because I can do it. Yeah. And it's the same with improvisation. But learning the grammar of improvisation is a fairly difficult job.
And if we know in the beginning when we start how much work goes into it and how difficult it is really to sound good, maybe we wouldn't even start, right? So it's good to be naive in the beginning. I think it's a normal process in the beginning. We're sort of naive about it, and then we realize it's not so easy. And I think this is the point where we really have to sit down and start practicing and just not give up and understand that it's not easy, and not only for you and for me, but for everybody. So read a lot of autobiographies about other jazz improvisers, how much they struggled, and welcome to the club. So point number 7, what really freaks me out, what I see with so many guitar players is they never practice in subdivisions. So what they're playing is always somewhere. It's not that it's bad, but it's just not tight. I'm not going to demonstrate that today. I can maybe demonstrate that in another video. But subdivision, that means basically you can count while you play and every note falls in one of the syllables you speak. So a subdivision could be 8 notes. Let's say you have a tune that has only 8 notes. Then you would have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and then you would play the head or whatever it is while counting out loud and finding the right place, which with every syllable. Could also be triplets, right? 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplets, or 60 notes. But it makes all the difference because it takes out the guesswork. So you have a designated place for every note. It's not laid back or somewhere there, but it's on the third triplet or what have you. Point number 8 is listening. So on the one hand, I mean listening to jazz, going on concerts, people play or want to play jazz guitar and don't listen to the music. Don't get me started on that subject. But the other point is, or the other thing that I want to mention is listening to each other. So when we play with somebody else, right, not on our own with our computer in our room, but if we meet an actual person, we sometimes are reminded that we need to listen to the other person so that we know where we are, right? And then that's very hard in the beginning because we are so occupied with our chords and all the stuff that goes on that we have to deliver while listening. So if you find yourself unable to listen to the other person while you're playing, that's normal. That's a beginning stage. This will pass. And after a while, if you have been playing for a longer time, you will find yourself listening more to the other person. And right, if you play with somebody, you really just like try to hear what's happening in the room when, for example, one solo ends and the next starts, that you don't stop just like because it's your solo now, but just that the accompaniment moves on right underneath it, so that you're both sort of responsible for this piece of music to sound out in a nice way, always thinking about the audience that makes sense to them. And if that doesn't work in the beginning, that's because it's just too much to worry about. Point number 9 is beginning jazz guitarists, don't know shit about nuances. What do I mean by that? That, you know, jazz guitar playing and improvisation is sort of, maybe it's not the right word, but it's sort of so fragile since it's an improvisation, right? And so where we are, in which room, the amp sounds different, the chair's different, the tune is faster than we played it yesterday, the other person is grumpy. So there are many, many things that change because jazz improvisation is really very close to life. And if we have been playing a great solo yesterday and we think now we're going to just repeat the experience, next day, same tune, other place, or maybe even next day, same tune, same place, it won't probably not repeat itself unless you have been memorizing your solo, which is not the aim of an improvisation, but it will always be different and always feel different. You know, like when we have like an experience, whatever it is, we have a really nice day with our family and with our kids, and we went to this lake and the sun was shining and it was a perfect day, and we want to repeat that. Probably not going to happen like this, even if the sun is going to shine and everybody's going to come along one more time. It's not going to be the same feeling, and that's the same thing, sort of what happens when you're improvising, because it feels different depending on your own form and the form of the other person. And I think accepting that and, you know, being in the moment and being happy with what is happening in the moment and not controlling stuff is the way to go. Yeah, and point number 10 is practicing in a stressed out manner. I'm repeating myself. I know I said that in the beginning of the video, but I just want to mention it again. I see just that many people, practice with their screens, with their handies, with their smartphones, and between two, you know, stressful events, try to have a routine that you practice in the same room maybe and at the same time if you can every day, and start your freaking practice session with a slow exercise. 40 beats per minute, you're playing half notes. Do that for 10 minutes. It's like a meditation, and then start or continue practice routine from a point of mental freedom. And that's it for today. I see you around. Bye.